So, I'm going to tell you an incident that happened to me recently that's relevant to today's theme. I was in New York a few weeks ago. I saw a few clients, I caught a few shows, and on some downtime, I wanted to book one of those 360-degree viewing platform experiences to get a sense of the city that I was visiting. I love to do that. I'm scared of heights, but I really love going to get that bird's eye view of a city when I can. And so I planned it in advance. I wanted to book my tickets and I wanted to choose the right date to fit in with my packed itinerary. I wanted to choose the right time. I wanted to catch the golden hour, the sunset. And I didn't quite know when the right moment was and which was going to be the busier moment. So I spent a lot of time trying to work that out and then exploring the website where I was going to book this and all the options that were available to me. And then I came to pay. And that's when the system fell down for me. I couldn't put in my credit card address. It didn't accept a UK postcode, and I don't think it accepted London as a state or whatever I tried to fill in. So I couldn't book the ticket. I thought this was crazy. We build websites. We just I couldn't imagine how this could be a problem. So I cleared my session, my browser session. I closed everything down. I started again. Still couldn't book. I thought, well, I'll give it another go tomorrow. And I came back the next day and still I couldn't book. So what did I do? In the end, I had to leave the website. I couldn't book my ticket through them. So that's just one example of maybe not a great user experience when visiting a website. And that is the theme of today's session. So we're going to explore that with you in more detail. Before we do, it's rude not to do introductions. So I'm going to introduce your speakers shortly. But before I do that, I would love to hear who has joined us in this session today. So find the chat box if you can. We do this every time, and introduce who you are, where you're from, and maybe explain also, just for us to gain some experience of what experience is in the room, whether you are managing an existing website and are looking to improve user experience on an existing website, or whether you're planning to build a new website and you want to be informed about the idea of user experience for that. So if you can put that in the chat box just now, I'll give you a few moments of silence for you to do that. And once I start seeing a few responses, I will carry on. And thank you for those who jumped in straight away. That's really helpful. Great. While you continue doing that, please, if you haven't finished, please do. Let me introduce my colleagues who are joining me today as well. So your speakers today are myself. I'm going to do the first section, and then two colleagues from our project management team, Kay and Antonia. Kay has got some experience developing and launching some websites this year, in particular, most recently, Music Managers Forum. She'll pick up on some of that, maybe in the Q&A session as well. And also Antonia, she's been working on launching the Arts Council's latest website, the first phase of it at least, which is all in their accessibility platform. So we'll definitely be referring to that where relevant as well. So that is your speakers today. Thank you for introducing yourself. I can see, looking through the list, that there are some people who returned from previous webinars. We welcome you back. It's really great to see your support here today, including some of our clients I can see in there as well. So hi to you as well. I also see some newcomers, some names I don't recognize. So again, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us on this webinar. We've been running them since lockdown, and I think we're now clocked up about 3 years worth of webinars. So we're incredibly proud of the opportunity to do these and share the information that we use on a daily basis with you as well. So for the newcomers, let me just explain who we are. HDK, we're an agency. We've been running for 20 years. We work particularly with the arts, culture and heritage sector. We build websites, we run social media and digital marketing campaigns as well that support websites as well. So digital experiences across the board. So what are we going to cover today? Kay, if you take us to this following slide, we're going to cover 3 areas. I'm going to start off by giving an overview of user experience. And then we're going to break user experience down into several components, and Kay's going to share that with you. She's going to talk about a checklist that we've developed that we'll be able to share with you with the follow-up slides and video of this session. And then Antonia is going to talk about user data and how to best inform your decisions. We'll then have a short break for a feedback survey, and then we'll continue with a Q&A. We hope to do all of that within the hour, hopefully less. We like to finish early if we can, but it depends how the Q&A goes often. And as I said, we'll make a recording of this available to you in the next few days. It might not be up by tomorrow, but we'll email you when the recording is available, along with the download that we're going to talk about as well. So we did some in-house training on Tuesday with a facilitator that I've known for a long time called Dan, and he reminded us at the beginning of the session, and I haven't got a slide for this, that if you think about how much you learn in sessions like this, webinars, conferences, lectures, typically we forget 97% of what we're listening to, and we only remember about 3%. So what is it that we can do to try and retain more of that in these sessions? And Dan reminded me that we encourage active listening. So what do I mean by that? Well, we will try and ask questions throughout this session, and we love it if you can use the chat box to engage, interact with us with your questions. We'll look out for those. So help yourself, make sure that you're not wasting your time here today by active listening. And if you do have a question, put them in the chat box as you think of them, because I think that's a really important part of active listening. And we'll try and come back to that either in the Q&A or earlier if we can do. Or you might find that there are colleagues who can answer the question while we're carrying on with a webinar. And on that point, I've got Yannick, who's been in previous webinars. He's sitting in the wings as well to help us. He's also got great UX experience. And he'll be sharing some of his thoughts in the Q&A as well, if we need to. So we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to crack on with the first question that I have for you. And that is in the chat box, we would love to hear examples that you have when you've been frustrated using a website. Now, please don't name and shame, particularly if it's a colleague in the arts and culture sector here today, or that we know, or might be watching the recording later. But we'd love to hear the things that have frustrated you, that you immediately come to think of when we talk about this. So Becca from Theatre Royal has already jumped in with poor mobile experience. I think that's a really important one that we've come to really focus on in the last few years as well. And I'm going to have to open up my yeah, here's a good one. Poor color combination, irritating eyes, broken links that don't work. Gosh, there are loads of them coming through here. So overcrowded websites, overly complicated user journeys. I think we are getting a lot through there. So we're getting the idea. You have a clear idea on what contributes poor user experience for you here. I guess I like to think about, once we've got all of those and you're thinking about your own website, we want to think, well, why does this matter? Why is it important to have good user experience? Why should we be dealing with bad and trying to eliminate bad user experience? So my next question here for you is, what's at stake? So again, maybe in the chat box here, and I've got a few thoughts of my own, but maybe you can think about and share what you think is at stake if we don't deal with bad user experience. Sales and management, absolutely. Abandonment and checkouts, sales and retention, losing customers. Yeah, that's a really good, strong theme, I think. I guess I've got 4 sort of groupings that I'm sure all of those will fit in. See if you can think of any other groupings that I've missed out. But my 4 groupings are, I think, already shared here is sales. Do you want to click? Yeah. Thank you. Sales. So a lot of those that you suggested are around sales, ticket sales, loss of ticket sales, loss of ancillary sales. Yeah. Colette has just put brand reputation. That was one of mine as well. Reputation is an area that I think we risk and that is at stake here. I think an example of that company, me not being able to book with that company, I actually did book through an intermediary website in the end, but that company presumably would have lost out the data, whether that's Google Analytics data, whether that's my personal data, depending on the agreement with that other company. So they would have lost out of that. And then influence, we're not always necessarily selling something, but we are trying to influence something, bring about change, and that frustration might help to limit that influence. So a little thought on what's at stake and why user experience is important. So then what are we going to do about it? And obviously that is the theme of today's session, and Kay will go into that in more detail. But there's a principle I wanted to share that's very much inspired for me by the British cycling team. So I don't know how many of you know this story. It's one I go back to quite often. But in 2003, the management of the British cycling team was taken over by a guy called David Brailsford. And he had this concept that he wanted to push through on the British cycling team, who up until that date had only won 1 British gold in the Olympics. And I think that was back in 1908. They'd never won the Tour de France. And he wanted the team to focus on what he called the aggregate of marginal gains, the aggregate of marginal gains. So this is the idea that you break down all of the everything that goes into a cycling race, and you start to focus individually on those components and improve them, maybe as little as 1%. So this idea that you make a 1% improvement here, a 1% improvement there, you strive for a 1% improvement there, and so on. And all of those little small improvements across the board come together to make this compound effect. And so much so in the case of the British cycling team that they went on a trajectory that won them gold medals, 60% of the gold medals in the Beijing Olympics back in 2008. And then went on to improve that record with more world records broken in the British Olympics in 2012. And that year, I think, was the year that Bradley Wiggins won the Tour de France as well. So they were making an amazing impact across the board, down to this idea of making up these small gains across the board. So I wanted to take that theme and apply that to running a website, to thinking about user experience and thinking about those marginal gains that you can make, that discipline, by always focusing on small, minute improvements across, where individually you might think, well, that's never going to have an impact on the ticket sales that I need. But that discipline of continually making those improvements will do. So that's my principle that I wanted to share with you first. Kay, how can we take that and apply that sort of lesson to user experience from websites?
Thank you, Hans. That was a very beautiful analogy of making the website more user-friendly. So yeah, how do you make your website more user-friendly? As Hans mentioned before, we are going to be sharing a checklist after this webinar. We do have 2 main sections on the checklist. One is before you get started, And the next one is UX checklist. So the before you get started part is a little bit of a mini discovery. It's a stepping stone. It's the foundation of your website with the objectives and everything. You might have done this when you were first creating the website as a discovery phase, defining your objectives, running a competitor analysis, and reviewing your website data if you've already had one before. And this is just a reminder for you to just refresh in your memories on how you set up the objective and see if that's still staying true at the moment. If any objective has changed, what purpose is your website serving? How is your competitor doing nowadays? And what do you like about their website, and what kind of things you could sort of implement on your website from what you're seeing from your competitors. Reviewing your website with data, this Antonia will dig in further after my part with the checklist. So today I'm just going to sort of explain a little bit more on user personas in user journey mapping. Because I think this is two good tools to use in order to make your website a little bit more user-centric, to make sure that you're not pushing a website to the users. It's sort of allowing the users come to the website and enjoy their interactions and have a clear view of what your website is offering. So this is one template that we use for creating a user persona. Essentially, what we would like for a user persona is to give a name, give a face to the user that you're creating the website for. It's almost like if you don't have a user persona, it's almost like preparing a Christmas gift without knowing who that person is. That was a struggle last time when we were having a secret Santa in the office because we didn't know who this gift was going to be for. So it sort of became random gift giving. So best practice for user persona is to actually talk to your audiences, have a direct conversation, think about, learn about their occupations, their interests, what influences them, their goals, what they're expecting from your website, also like what drives them, what is their pain points, and also like to gather all of that information into one or maybe 2 or 3 user personas, and just have that in mind to give you a more, it will allow you to empathize a little bit more to your users, which then will allow you to create a little bit more user-centric website. So with that user persona, we create a user journey map. So this is one of the many templates that you can find on the internet. This is one that I like to use on Figma. It's a whiteboard tool that you can use. So you sort of define the stages. Right now on here, it says awareness, consideration, conversion, endorsement, loyalty. This can change based on what you want your website to, how you want it to function. This is, again, the reason why we'd like to set up the goals and objectives for the website so that you can clearly set out the journey steps. And based on each of the journey steps, you can write down what the users might do on that steps, what their expectation might be. And then from then on, you can specifically pinpoint what the pain points would be, what kind of struggles the users might go through during each of the process, so that it gives you a better idea on what kind of improvements you can make on the website. So with that in mind, we can dive into going through the checklist. This is a general review in 8 tasks. Again, when we share the full document after this webinar, it will have the subtasks outlined, so more in detail for you to go through. Please feel free to look over them. Today, because we're going through marginal updates that you can make, we're going to be going through some of the key points from here that you can make as a website administrator, as a website editor, to without having to have too much knowledge on coding or on websites. So first one is to evaluate site structure and navigation, and then checking if the website is responsive to different devices and browsers. Then the third one is making content analysis. So a website is almost like a tree. So when you first plant a tree, it looks great. The branches looks amazing. They have nice leaves. And then you keep giving them water, giving them fertilizer, and the tree starts growing like branches, more leaves, and then more branches, and then the branches sort of intertwine to each other. And it just sometimes become a little bit messy. And that's when you want to prune your tree. And that's exactly what you want to do with your website. So what we would encourage you to do is to just get a full list of your pages that you have on your website. Put it in a Post-it. It can be on a physical Post-it or on this like virtual whiteboard. I would encourage you to put it in same colored Post-it notes so that nothing is standing out, that they all look the same. And then just gather with your team and group the Post-its together in depending on whether or not they're sharing the same theme or sharing the same characteristics. It's very helpful to involve someone who doesn't know your websites that well, so that they're not too biased about how the website navigation works. When you group them all together, try and find hierarchies between within the groups, and then also finding hierarchies between the groups that you've defined. Then this is how you get a sitemap. And after you've sort of restructured your sitemap, try comparing that to your website and see if it's actually staying true to what it is right now, and if it needs any changes or improvements. After you've done that, it's always a great idea to involve someone else, a third party, to actually give them a scenario and say, imagine you are a person looking for a volunteer opportunity. How would you find that information? And see how that person go about to find that information. If they're stumbling upon a different navigation points, maybe that's a red flag for you to sort of restructure your site map and navigations. So that's one tip from us to always test, make changes, then test, make changes. This navigation can be very flexible. The next one is to test that your website is responsive across all devices and browsers. In HTK, before we launch the website, we make sure that it is mostly compatible across different devices, different browsers. By statistics, these are the 3 browsers that people use the most: Chrome, Safari, and Edge. We also test if it's working on iPhone or Android phone. Hans is one of the very few team members who has an Android phone, so I always ask him to test the website for me.
I'm a big fan of the Google Pixel phone.
Yeah. And also Yannick as well, yeah. So we also tested if it's working on the website on iPhone, on iPads, or a laptop, or a big smart TV screen. You might not have all of these tools. Sometimes I ask my flatmate to borrow their iPads because I don't have any laptop. So, but one trick that you can use is to go on to use Chrome. There's also this function in Safari as well. If you go onto the website and right-click, there's a section where you can inspect. And this gives you an idea of how the website looks in different viewports. You can make it wider, make it smaller, and this gives you an idea of how the hamburger menu looks like, how it looked like on a bigger screen. Also, I mean, this is always not the exact thing that will show you how it would look like, but it gives you a general idea. The best practice is to test on different devices, mainly on different browsers, and maybe just check on one operation system and another and see if it's looking the same. If you're done with that, the content, I think, is the most important part that you can make as an editor. Those are the marginal gains that you can make. 4 items that we brought up here in content analysis is to make sure that your content is readable by audience. our best practice business standard is to make sure that it is readable and understood by Year 9 students. Try using everyday language, avoid using jargons and abbreviations, and check if the line length is around 45 to 80 characters long. So if the sentence is coming from all the way from here to there, then people would have to really pan in to read what they're saying. So it's really important to make sure that it's falling within the range people are reading in. Consistency is also important. It's important to make sure it's consistent to the brand tone of voice. Also, call to action, also known as CTA, is a button or banner that might be clickable to encourage users to do something. It's always a great idea to describe the action that they are going into before they're clicking something. So instead of saying next, maybe say click here to next slide, so that it gives you a general more idea of what that button or that link is doing for you by clicking that. So it encourages them more to interact with your website. We also have thing about heading, making sure it's logical and consistent. Effective use of heading and subheading really helps users to pinpoint the exact information they might want to find on your website. But it is very important to keep track of, make sure that the headings are following the right order. Don't put small text in heading 3, or make, if it's a long paragraph, make sure that it is a paragraph, not a heading, so that it doesn't convolute the website with so many headings. So these are the examples and checkpoints that you might want to go through. There are more detailed guidelines on the actual document, but now I will
before you do,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. So can you just tell us a little bit about the checklist? How has the checklist been brought together? What is it based on?
So first of all, we went through our manifestly list before.
So for people who don't know what manifestly is, it's a name that we've given for peculiar reasons to our own checklist, basically, isn't it?
Yes. So every time we have a new project coming in, we always create that board, make sure we always follow that guideline and tick up checkbox. And in there, we have guidelines as to all the things that we want to make sure is correct before we launch a website. And a lot of it is falling under the category of user experience, making sure that it's a great user experience for everyone. So that was the major framework of our checklist. We also got a little bit of help from ChatGPT and see what the AI has to say about this. We've also got some internal on-the-job knowledge that our colleagues gained with Raf and Yannick and Antonia as well, and just gathered all that information into a nice little 5-page long document.
So it's very easy to follow. It's digestible. It's not too technical. We didn't want it to be too technical. It's just something that anyone who could just take this and give you a sort of a sense of things that you might want to consider if you are managing a website or planning to build a new website. So we're going to put that on the website for you to download. I'd love to get your feedback if it's helpful or not afterwards at some point, but it's there as a free resource to be made available in the next couple of days. Sorry, I interrupted you, Kay.
No worries. Yeah, I was just about to hand it over to Antonia, who's now going to talk a little bit more about using data on your website.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I was going to say the checklist is a good user experience in itself. But also let us know if you think so too. So as Kay mentioned, as part of the checklist, reviewing your website data and analytics is an important part of monitoring your user experience. It can help you understand what's important to your users and what their habits are and just their preferences. And then that can help you to review your current website or how you approach your new website in different ways. So as professionals, we often make assumptions when making decisions, especially about our own website, because we're using it every day. And something that we're used to, there might be an area on the website that's like 10 clicks deep, but you know it's there, so it makes sense for you, so you can get to it really easily without even realizing that actually that's probably not the most user-friendly way of getting to that information. So there are tools like Google Analytics, which you've probably heard of and might be using, but these can help in different ways for specifically user experience by telling you how people are using your site, so you can monitor the user journey. You can find out what are the most dominant user journeys, and also how you can make them easier and more streamlined for them. You can also find out what are the most important pages, so what are the most frequently visited pages and what are the actions that users are taking. So then you could consider, is that something that could then become a call to action on your homepage, so you can make it even easier for them, as well as considering your main navigation, as Kay touched on as well, and that hierarchy, and really kind of review that journey as a whole. It's also great for finding any sticky areas, any kind of trends that aren't expected. So if you are looking at your user journey and you see that people are either leaving the website or going off somewhere else when you would expect them to take another step instead, like go to checkout or read further on an article, then you can really review that page, for example, and make some changes. And then by using the data, you can monitor how successful those changes have been and if they've had an impact. And then you can tweak it as you need to, and then you can find out even more what's useful to your users. There's other tools out there as well, like Hotjar, and that uses heat maps and video playback of users using your website, so you can kind of see how they're navigating, and it's great for pinpointing any areas that might be a bit confusing. So for example, there might be an image that looks kind of like a button and people keep pressing it, so then you'd know that that could be something to take a look at. We recently worked with Dance Umbrella, who have a festival of dance every year, and they wanted to review their website user experience for their festival this year based on data and feedback from the previous year. A key part of the website they wanted to address was the event pages. So previously, this is what an event page looked like, and all the information, I think somebody did mention this actually in the chat, where all the information was stacked vertically, so the user would have to scroll to find out information and further information without kind of necessarily knowing where on that page that it might be. So we reviewed the design and the layout of that page, and we made sure that when the user joins the page, all of that information is up front. So there's a key box which has all the logistical information that you could need, and it's highlighted by the design of it. And then there's also clear call to actions and buttons, so that the user can understand what details are on that page, what actions they can take, and can get straight to them, whether that is to buy a ticket, to watch the video, to find out more about the artist. So it's just streamlined that whole experience. Another example, which is with a brand you're probably more familiar with, is with Airbnb. We didn't work on this app, but it's a really good example of how understanding what the data is telling you can inform changes on your website that work for everybody. So they discovered that over 1.5 million photos a year had been shared between guests and hosts about checking in and checking out. And they thought, we can make this much simpler for both sides, and much more consistent and easy relationship. So they integrated a system within the app, which means that the host can create guides for checking in and checking out. They can create sections and then add pictures, add further details. It means it's really easy for the host to keep up to date, and they can make changes without kind of editing all of it. And then it also, for the user, for the guest, it's much more digestible. The information is in sections, it's consistent and it's clear, and it just brought that need to share lots of images all the way down. Another way of gathering data is by user testing and usability testing, and that's when you arrange with a group of people how, and they can go through your website. You can ask them questions, like Kay mentioned earlier. You can give them scenarios, whether that's to go through the checkout process, or to sign up to the newsletter, find some specific information on your website, and then they will give you real-time feedback as they're experiencing it. And this is really helpful because it's giving a bit more of a narrative to the data that you're kind of already monitoring. But these people, like I said earlier, they're not going to be making assumptions because they're not familiar with your website. So they are an unbiased opinion. And that is a really useful insight into how people are using your website. So we recently launched the Arts Council England's new website for their accessibility scheme called All In. The scheme itself is about making the arts more accessible for everybody. So accessibility is the core of the entire project. So conscious of this, we used user feedback throughout the entire building process. So we had accessibility advisory groups throughout wireframing and site mapping, and they gave us feedback that we could take on board through to the design phase. And they also reviewed the design as well, just before we built it. And then once we had built the site and all the content was added in, it then went through a period of user testing. This meant that users with different accessibility requirements could go through the site, whether that's navigating it with a keyboard, using a screen reader, and they could give us valuable insight into how accessible the website was, if there was any tips on where we could improve. And we took that all on board before we launched. But because user experience is something that is continuously needing to be monitored and kept up on top of as your website grows, Arts Council have recognised that, and there's still the possibility to go through the site and users to give feedback on how accessible and how easy their experience was with the website, and to give us tips on how we could improve it as the project progresses. So in summary, there's two very strong ways of gathering data. Your analytics can tell you what is happening on your website, whereas user testing can tell you why it's happening. And because of that, it's really important to use them both and not make any decisions kind of solely on one, because, you know, with the data, again, we'd be making assumptions and kind of adding a narrative into the numbers. Whereas with user testing, although it's a small group of people and it is practical, it is still opinionated. So it's good to kind of look at them both together and make sure the feedback that you've gathered through user testing, by looking at your data, you can see, is that a familiar pattern before making any key decisions? They come together to make a full picture.
Great. Thank you, Antonia. That's really interesting. So we're coming to the end of the prepared work that we part of the presentation. before we're going to come shortly to the Q&A as well, so have those questions in mind if you've got some questions. But before we do that, I would love it if we could just share in the chat, in the meantime, any learnings that people have had that they might be able to take forward in their own work in any way whatsoever. So use the chat if there is a point that you remember and you want to share it with the group. It's really helpful for everyone to see. Thank you, Becca. So we've got how to inspect the page in different sizes. It's a really practical tool that once you know how to do it, if you're managing websites regularly, you'll be able to use that again and again. So yeah, I think that's a really useful tool as well. Just to sort of encourage you, we've got some points that I probably want to recap over. I guess one of the points that in the summary that I would draw out at this point is I talked about the aggregate of marginal gains. So and this idea that there's just having that discipline to look at lots of different things continually and just constantly making small improvements across the board. Kay shared with you items on a checklist and that hopefully you'll be able to refer back to at critical moments when you need to look at things that you might want, tasks that you might want to set yourself to make improvements. And I think for me, out of Antonia's points, this idea that user feedback and data will help you to make informed decisions. So I can see that, what else have we got? Harry's written, site mapping and user journey mapping is a fantastic way to establish gaps. Yeah, totally. Dead ends in the user journey. Post-it exercise I will absolutely be doing with the team. I've always used post-its. You know, there's some great online tools as well, but there's something about sitting around a table and moving those post-it notes that I've always found really helpful. Thank you for your feedback there. And Raf is making a point. Raf, do you want to are you happy to explain your point about development mode?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yes, it depends on the browser, really. Safari has a development mode that needs to be activated before you can actually use it. And then once activated in the settings, you should be able to go to develop in the top menu and then choose enter responsive design mode, which allows you to see a page at different sizes, whether a mobile or a tablet or even a very large monitor. But that really depends on browsers. I've just given you the example of Safari.
Thank you, Raf. So Raf, I should explain, is one of our UX experts. He's our creative director and has been designing websites for, well, a long time, nearly 20 years, I'm guessing, Raf. So brings a lot of UX experience to building websites here. So and he's come back from another appointment. So thank you for joining us. And I guess the point here is with UX. It's such a broad topic. It's very hard for one person to be expert in all the elements. So here at HDK, we have got experts within the field of user experience, and Raf is one of those, and Yannick is also in the area as well to help us if we need him as well. So before we get to the Q&A, and I see Becky's also submitted a question. So if you've got any other questions, keep submitting them. And we'll come back to them in a moment. Before we get on to the Q&A, we've got a bit of housekeeping. The first thing is to do a feedback survey. It's 7 very short questions. The link's coming up in the chat box now. Again, I'll just go silent for a few moments. And if you can just complete those quick 7 questions for us, it really helps us to improve these webinars and build on them. I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're building on them shortly. But yeah, if we just go quiet for a few moments while you complete that, I'll give you a minute. And then if you can just say that you've finished it in the chat, then when I've seen enough responses, I'll carry on. I can see some people completing it. So I'll please do, if you haven't finished it, please continue. Hopefully won't take you very long, but I will move things along now because I'm conscious of the time. Before we do the Q&A, just a reminder about upcoming webinars. The next one coming along soon, next month, is our annual website and digital marketing trends. We do this every year. We get the whole team involved and everyone we try and come up with 12. We will come up with 12 trends that we'll share with you in short bursts, just to give you sort of set the scene for 2024, what we think is going to be important. And then other than that, we've now set all the 12 webinars for next year on the website. So that link's coming up in the chat in just a second. It might already be there. Yeah, it's there. And also, we also have a newsletter. We bring together a lot of the blogs, case studies, industry insights. They are only sent out about 3 or 4 times a year. We try for 4, we fail, we get it out 3 times a year. That we certainly don't bombard you with news. We try and keep it sort of very valuable content that you'll find useful. So we're about to send another one out this week. And then probably another one in the new year, January, February time. But if you want to sign up to that link is in the chat. It's not the hello@wearehtk, although you can use that just to reach out to us at any point. So that's the housekeeping. I'm going to come to the Q&A now. So I saw a couple of questions already in the chat box. Thank you for those who've completed the survey while I scroll through that. Melanie has asked if anyone has a brief that they have used to commission a new website that they'd be willing to share, and she'd be very grateful. So she's given her email address. The only thing I'll add to that, Melanie, is that we did a webinar back some time ago. It's a guide to your perfect website for arts, culture and heritage organization. I think it was that one. And I think we did it. Create a new website can be challenging, complicated, but it doesn't have to be. This session provides a guide to the process to help achieve the perfect website. So I think we talk about the setting the brief and the procurement bit. So I'll just put that link, because I've just found it, into the chat there for you, in case you wanted to go through that webinar from last year, earlier in the year at some point. All the other thing I was saying, it's very hard to get the perfect brief for as an organization that receives briefs all the time. There's certainly not a standard template. So I would recommend if you can get a couple, 2 or 3 maybe even, and work out what feels right for you and what you're trying to achieve, because some, you can have too much detail, you can have too little detail. It's that sort of Goldilocks situation where you want to get the perfect brief for your situation. So try get a few if you can. I'm sure that's what you're trying to do. So I saw, we'll come back to Anam's question in a moment. I saw one earlier on, I think it was it Becky? Yeah, Becca. For selling theatre shows, should we delete the link or archive it? We often have dead links that go to shows that have passed. Does this affect the response rate? So I think we've got a couple of questions here. I think answers here. I think, first of all, we think do not delete the links, and we think archiving is better. And we also agree that adding messaging on the page that the show has passed and making that really clear on the actual, so you have your list of shows. When you click through to it, make sure that the design is really clear that this is a past show is really important. But otherwise, it's helping with SEO, for example. It's helping with students who want that information. It helps probably with your own organization who wants to check back on things as well. So it becomes this resource for a certain amount of people. It might not be your ticket buyers, but there's probably other things you can do in the way that it's navigated as well. Has anyone on the team got anything to add to that answer? Becca, do you think that answers your question? Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I would also like to add, like sometimes you don't have to archive all of the events. Sometimes you can choose which of the events you would like to archive, which some of them might be, duplicates of the other events. So you might just want to leave one of that events to make sure that people are not convoluted when they go onto your archive list, because as the website goes on, you will have more and more and more events that will be piled up in your archive. So you want to make it as concise as possible, although it's an archive of all the works, beautiful works that you've done in the past.
And I also that gave me a chance to remember another thing that we did. Not only can you can make these happen automatically. So if you're using a CMS system like WordPress, you can make it so happen so that when it goes from being a future event to a past event, it automatically changes the signaling, the signposting on that page to automatically say this is a past event. But other things that we've done for clients is remove things like booking links. So those things can be hidden automatically when it goes into a past state to help make it clear that it's not tripping up people who land on a page thinking it's a future event and a past event. So those sorts of tricks that you can help, but then it keeps it there as part of the archive and helping SEO. Great, thank you for that question. Anam asks, would love to know how people are gathering website-specific user feedback. So does anyone in the team want to jump in with that one? So I guess, thank you, Yannick. Yeah, Yannick's going to jump in here.
Hi everyone, nice to hear you all. Yes, so one of the tools that Antonio mentioned before was Hotjar. Hotjar is quite easy to install on a website, and then you get basically you get data feedback, so you can see where you basically get like a heat map where you can see like if it's very red at the top, lots of people are clicking there, and you can actually see real-time recordings of how people are accessing your website. So that's a really great data tool. The other one is checking in with perhaps other departments, other people in the organization who maybe don't use the website as much, to ask for set some tasks, like could you book a ticket? Could you find out about an employee? Could you find out where to sign up for the newsletter? These kind of tasks, and then watching them do it. And that way you'll be able to see how someone outside the organization or outside the department tries to do your functions. It's really interesting because some people, sometimes something that's really obvious to someone who's using it a lot won't be so obvious to someone who's not. I always like to think of like when you ask a shark to swim, they'll swim in the ocean. And if you ask a bird to swim, they'll swim on top of the ocean. So even though they're doing something very similar, and I think just watching someone is where you can really gather that, I see you, that's where you're going for that kind of thing.
Great, thank you, Yannick. And I can see a response also. We've probably only got time for one more question just to flag up after this, but I hope I pronounced your name. Is it Alicia? Do you want to put your microphone on and talk about Microsoft Clarity and how you use that? Are you happy to do that? Don't worry if you're not, or if you're, yeah. I'll move on to the next question here. We've got any tool recommendations for mapping out user flows?
Yeah, I think I can answer that question. I am a strong advocate of a program called Figma. This is where I create both sitemaps and user personas and user journeys and wireframing. But also Figma, it has two separate systems. One is to sort of give you a better idea on how the website can be structured, or it has like a whiteboard system where you could put in post-it notes or put in rectangles and make relationships between circles and make a flow from it. Also, in Figma, there is an opportunity for you to search out templates that people might have created already for you. So that's where you can find a lot of templates around user personas or user journey mapping, if that's what you were trying to look for. We also, in terms of sitemaps, we also use a tool called GlueMap. It gives you a little more rigid view of, and it helps you create hierarchies between the pages a lot easier. So if you want a less fiddly version of user flow, Schooloomap is also a good option for you.
Brilliant.
And Antonia, we did have another program that we also used for creating some flows that we used for internal user flow. Do you remember the name of that program?
No, sorry, I can't recall it right now, but if I do, I'll let Hans know so we can share that out in the email as well.
Great. Okay, I did say that was the last question. I'm conscious of the time. I thank you for. I can see there's a question here that that Harry's put in. We are in the process of trying to streamline our website as we've completed phase 1 of migration and redesign, and are heading into phase 2 early next year. We have a lot of pages, dead stops, gaps in the user journey, pages left over from old websites. What would you suggest are the top 3 things we should be doing as a team to ensure this phase eliminates our current issues? Happy to be on more generally. Very quick answer from the team. I guess this is, am I right in thinking this sounds like it's site mapping exercise? And we have tools that we often share with clients. We have processes that we have to, first of all, to, I guess, audit all of those. What's the sort of typical steps that we would be doing to helping the team rationalize all of these pages? Yannick, do you want to jump in there?
Hi, yes. So it depends on where you are in the project, but to give you a kind of general answer, what we normally do is we map out key journeys. So work out what the key journeys of our customers, like Kay was saying earlier, where we have the our key audience members and their key actions, perhaps booking a theatre show or booking a visit, whatever that key journey is, making sure that those ones are built into the into a wireframe or into a user journey. So what we'd be doing is what we always do is we always map out the ideal journey, especially when we're transforming old website to new website, and then as much as possible seeing how much you can repurpose old content into that journey, seeing where things can trim and where things can go. It's really about a lot about creating an ideal, and then you know what you're aiming for. And I think the top 3 things would be clarity, predictability, and make it enjoyable. So make the user journey as clear as possible so that it's really simple where to go. Make it predictable. So make labels really clear for what they do. For example, if you've got a tin and it says white paint on it, when you open it, you expect to see something, perhaps paint, but if it's a candle that smells like white paint, it's not quite clear what it is. So make sure all your labels are really, really clear. And then enjoyable would just be give them what they want. If they want to buy a ticket, give them that journey that they want to buy a ticket, and reduce the friction, the resistance to that. So reduce pop-ups or reduce other information that's perhaps not important on those pages. Great
answer. Thank you, Yannick. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the hour, and I think that's a good time for us to stop. Thank you, everyone who's been on this webinar. We've really appreciated you joining us. We hope to see you again in the future webinar, particularly our Christmas one coming up next month, and all the ones that we've set on the website. So thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.